He entered Harvard University at the age of 16. It was 1958, one of the most brilliant students in the institution. Then he went to Michigan, then to Berkeley. At the age of 25, he was a math teacher, the youngest in the history of the university. 2 years later, he resigned. No explanation. Disappeared. It was found years later in a cabin without electricity or piped water, in the middle of the mountains of Montana. Alone, isolated, growing your own food, and sending bombs by mail. For 17 years, the Unabomber terrorized the United States. 3 dead, 23 injured. The FBI couldn't find him. When he was finally captured, forensic psychiatry went to war with itself. Was he a schizophrenic genius or a psychopathic terrorist? The answer changed everything. Welcome to Psyche Obscure. Today we will get into Ted Kaczynski's mind, the case that divided forensic psychiatry and forced the world to face an uncomfortable question. Can extreme intelligence and madness coexist? The genius, Theodore John Kaczynski, was born in 1942 in Chicago. From an early age, it was evident that there was something different about him. Not just intelligence, genius. At the age of 10, he was tested with an IQ of 167. He skipped 2 grades at school. He entered Harvard at 16, one of the most prestigious universities in the world. But in Harvard, something happened that would mark Kaczynski forever. He was selected to participate in a psychological experiment conducted by Professor Henry Murray. The experiment, funded by the CIA as part of the MKUltra program, subjected students to intense and humiliating psychological interrogations. Your deepest values, beliefs, and ideas. They were systematically attacked for months. Kaczynski participated for 3 years. Decades later, researchers would point out this experiment as a possible turning point in your psychology. After Harvard, he went to Michigan for his doctorate in mathematics, then to Berkeley as a teacher. He was admired by his colleagues, respected academically, but socially completely isolated. No close friends, no relationships. A loneliness that grew in silence. The disappearance. In 1969, Kaczynski resigned from Berkeley. No warning, no proper explanation. He just left. He tried to live with his parents for a while, then with brother David in Texas. The relationships were tense, difficult. In 1971, he found what he was looking for. A wooden cabin of less than 3 square meters in the mountains of Lincoln, Montana. No electricity, no piped water, no neighbors. There, Kaczynski built his own reality. Read philosophy. I wrote. He hunted and grew food, and it was developing an increasingly radical ideology. Technology was destroying humanity. Industrial society had enslaved the human being, and it needed to be destroyed. Not as a metaphor, as a concrete plan. Unabomber. Between 1978 and 1995, Ted Kaczynski sent 16 bombs by mail. Targets, universities, and airlines. Hence the name given by the FBI, Unabomber. University and airline bomber. 3 people died. 23 were injured, some with permanent mutilations. The FBI set up one of the largest investigations in American history. Thousands of agents, millions of dollars. For 17 years, nothing. In 1995, Kaczynski made a proposal to the New York Times and the Washington Post, published their manifesto of 35,000 words, called The Industrial Society and Its Future, and he would stop killing. The newspapers published. It was the biggest mistake Kaczynski could make. David Kaczynski, the brother. Read the manifesto. He recognized the writing style. He recognized the ideas. and he called the FBI. In April 1996, federal agents arrived at the cabin in Montana. They found Kaczynski pump components, a detailed diary of the crimes, and the original of the manifesto. The psychiatric debate, Ted Kaczynski's trial, has become one of the most complex in the history of forensic psychiatry, not for the crime, but for the mind behind it. The defense wanted to use the insanity thesis. Psychiatric reports indicated paranoid schizophrenia, a serious mental disorder that distorts the perception of reality. The prosecutor's office argued that Kaczynski was perfectly sane, that his ideology, no matter how radical it was coherent, that he had meticulously planned every crime for 17 years, who knew exactly what he was doing. And then came the most disturbing part. Kaczynski himself rejected the defense out of insanity. He didn't want to be called crazy. I would prefer to be considered sane and responsible, to have his ideas discarded as psychotic delirium. For him, madness would be a greater defeat than prison. Schizophrenia or ideology? This is the point where forensic psychiatry still debates. On the one hand, those who see schizophrenia, extreme isolation, persecutory thinking, the belief of being the only one capable of saving humanity, the inability to maintain relationships, the paranoid letters sent to the family. On the other hand, those who see radical ideology, the extraordinarily coherent and sophisticated writing, the meticulous planning for decades, the ability to remain invisible for 17 years, the lucidity with which he debated philosophy and politics. Forensic psychiatrist Sally Johnson, designated by the court to evaluate it, concluded Kaczynski suffered from paranoid schizophrenia, but he was competent to be judged. This created a disturbing paradox. A man diagnosed with schizophrenia who refused his own defense out of insanity and was considered competent to do so. The disturbing legacy. Ted Kaczynski was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. He died in June 2023 at the age of 81 in a maximum security federal prison, but his legacy is more disturbing than any sentence. The manifesto he wrote, that should only be the proof of his madness. It continues to be read, debated, and cited. Philosophers, academics, and radical environmentalists recognize in it legitimate criticisms of technological society, even completely condemning the methods. And this is the most uncomfortable part. And if some of the ideas of a schizophrenic terrorist, are they right? Not the crimes. Never the crimes. But the questions about technology, autonomy, and alienation that he raised in a brutal and unacceptable way. These are questions that society has not yet answered. The Ted Kaczynski case has no easy answer. There is no simple monster. There is no simple fool. There is a genius that the academic system produced, that a questionable psychological experiment damaged, that isolation consumed, and who channeled all this into violence in the name of an ideology that starts from the academic world, still argues in silence. Forensic psychiatry learned from this case that genius and psychosis are not opposites, that intellectual coherence is not proof of sanity, and that the most dangerous questions, sometimes they come from minds that no one knew how to save. If this video made you think, leave the like and activate the bell. The Obscure Psyche exists to go where it is difficult to look. See you next time.